have what are called host homes, which is the thing that I equate it most to is like foster care, where if I were to be a host home provider, I would open my home to somebody with a disability and I would be their caretaker. I would get them to their doctor's appointments, I would get them to their job, I would get them to other things along those lines. And that's something that we're trying hard to get more people involved in, because it is the least restrictive environment in terms of how people live. Yeah.
I was looking for
Cool, that's awesome.
I was looking for a dial in, but I am trying to say down south.
Yeah, we have a lot more down south, down this area than we do over towards Chicago. We're getting there, but it just depends. And so with that, like I said, it's a least restrictive environment. We're trying to get people to be as independent as possible as they can be. And we do residential. We have a day program at our Peoria office that we have individuals come and participate in. Then we also have employment services, which is where I'm out of. We help individuals get competitive employment within the community, so minimum wage or better. We work with people on all spectrum of disability. We have some folks who work at Caterpillar. We've got some folks who work in Peoria Production Systems, which is it's a lot of modified stuff. They have like job coaches on site for them, which is great. So yeah, we just run the gamut of disability. So at EPIC, our mission is to enrich the lives of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. We work with more than just intellectual disabilities, but that's where we really were founded. Our vision is that we envision a world where people with developmental disabilities are inspired, respected, and engaged in their community, and that they're empowered to achieve their best with their families, guardians, and advocates, receiving the knowledge, resources, and support that they need. Basically, we just want to help people do what they can in their community. That's really where we're at. We started in 1950. We worked mainly with, it was a group of families in Peoria. Their children weren't able to get into school, so they were like, fine, we'll do it ourselves. And we just kind of morphed from there. So we started out working mainly with children in the 50s, and then now we work, not predominantly, we work 18 and above. So yeah, that's just a little bit about EPIC. Our core values are empowerment. We provide support and training for our individuals to achieve their personal best. Accountability. We effectively deliver person-centered services and communicate with honesty and transparency. With that means we have to have tough conversations. We have to say, hey, you can't come to work smelling like cigarettes all the time. You can smoke, that's fine. You have to take a shower before you come to work, because nobody wants you in the kitchen when you smell like an ashtray. Things along those lines. So we hold our individuals accountable just like we hold anybody else accountable. And then innovation, we use new technology and techniques to provide creative programming. Our day program just moved to a different program where it's more person-centered and the individuals can choose where they go during the day. We have a hub where individuals can make money and work doing data entry, things along those lines, and we also want to bring our individuals into the 21st century and we have helped them get emails, they make their own resumes, things along those lines. We don't want them to fall backwards just because they don't necessarily have the opportunity that we do. So, why work with EPIC Employment Services? Employers of people with disabilities don't hire their employees because of their disabilities. They get hired because of what they can do. But one reason for the recognition, the Disability Employment Program, like what we have at EPIC, establishes a special relationship between the employer and the employee. Those relationships may support the company to facilitate interviewing, hiring, and job training processes. That's just a really long-winded way of saying that when you work with us or when you hire a person with a disability, you're not hiring a person just because you want to look good on your taxes, because you want to be able to say, hey, we've got people with disabilities on our, not roster, you know what I mean.
Payroll.
Thank you. We've got people with disabilities on our payroll. Look at us, we're awesome. Is that a benefit? Absolutely, but you're not gonna hire somebody for a job that they can't do. And sometimes people just need to be reminded that just because somebody has a disability doesn't mean that they can't do that job. We provide job coaching, and that's just a little bit about the job coaching that we provide. We help individuals with the first few weeks, first few months of their job to get them acclimated to the climate and culture of their new place, and kind of help them figure out the processes to make things better for themselves. For example, if we have somebody who is working as a receptionist and they can't remember literally anything, it's me, I can't remember anything. We can say, hey, maybe write a to-do list. Maybe write something down. If you have to remember a phone number, Post-its, they're awesome. So something that an individual might not think of immediately, that's something that our job coaches can work with them on. And our job coaches help us. They provide us feedback. They provide the employers feedback as well. This is just some of the places that we have individuals in the Peoria area. We have somebody at the Chiefs, the Paradise Hotel. We have a couple people at Caterpillar, Hy-Vee, Camp Bow Wow. Just we run the gamut of people we have anywhere. And our retention for over a year is about 83% for individuals. My favorite fun fact is we've got somebody who's been at the East Peoria Library since 1997. It's wild. Like most people who've been working since 1997 don't want to anymore, but go you, my man. And this is just where we have individuals, where we help serve individuals just over the different counties. We used to have an office in Swansea, which is why we've got some of this down here, and we have an office in Springfield now, so we're still working with the southern part of Illinois. So when we go into working with people with disabilities, and I know that since it's Special Olympics, you guys have an idea of first language. This is just a run-of-the-mill, let's run over it type of thing. You want to make it with first language. It puts the person before the disability because they're people. They're not Down syndrome. They're not cerebral palsy. They're not dystonia. They're people. They're Jim, Joe, and Bob. And then some individuals prefer identity first language, generally in the autistic community, the blind community, or the deaf community. Those are just the ones that come off the top of my head, but there are other people. It's very much a person-centered with their identity, so the best thing to do is just ask for their preferences. Do you care? Do you want me to say person who's deaf? Do you want me to say deaf person? Do you just want me to call you Jill? Whatever. And then ableism, just in general, what it is. It's not just in dealing with discrimination experienced by people with disabilities. It refers to the reinforcement of the systems that we've got set into our society. So, workplace ableism can include, but it's not limited to language that perpetuates stereotypes, assuming that an applicant with a disability is less qualified for the position they've applied for, specifically like when you're thinking about what it is they're doing, if you know that they have a disability, does it actually affect that? If somebody's got cerebral palsy, they can absolutely data entry, they can absolutely answer phones, it just depends on the person, again. Designing buildings without ramps, bathrooms, adequate space for wheelchair users. Before I had taken any ADA information, like in college, I didn't even think about the fact that like elevators have to be so big or else they're useless for somebody with a wheelchair. That's great that they exist, but if it only opens 14 inches, good luck, have fun. You can't squeeze that. You can think so many skinny thoughts, but the wheelchair can't do that. And then questioning why an employee with mental health conditions might need extended time off of work. That's also discrimination, even if you're doing it with the best of intentions. It's not what we're supposed to do. When we advocate with people with disabilities, as supervisors, there are some ways that you can do that. Supporting employees who think they might need an accommodation. Asking straight up, do you need an accommodation for this? Isn't really the way to do it, but if somebody approaches you, absolutely, we can work with that. Communicating directly with the person, not through a caregiver unless specifically requested. There are some individuals who are going to want that, but they're just like with you or me, I would be really upset if you called my mom and said, hey, you need to work with Taylor on this. I'm a 34-year-old woman. I don't need you to call my mom to tell me that I need to wear a cardigan to work tomorrow or something like that. And this, especially like with individuals who use interpreters or who are deaf, talk to the person, not to the interpreter. Asking questions to understand needs and preferences. Yeah, you're not gonna know unless you ask, and especially if it's something that's going to make life easier for the individual, they're gonna wanna answer that. Being mindful of different communication styles and needs. Not everybody is a great reader, so using email isn't always the best option. Going in and checking on somebody, or using the telephone. Or somebody who isn't great at talking, telephones are gonna be hard. Sometimes texting is the way to do that. Sometimes people, I mean, I'm sure you've seen people with the Dynavoxes or the talking boxes. Keeping in mind that just because somebody doesn't communicate the same way you do doesn't mean that they don't have anything to say. They just like us, they all have preferences and they have things that would make their life easier. And we just have to be open to that. And as supervisors, asking those questions and being open to the things that they say is really important. Giving time for communicating and processing. Sometimes you can say a bunch of words and then somebody will stare at you for a solid 10 seconds and then they pick right up and it's fine. I saw this a lot when I was teaching. I would word vomit a lot and then a kid would just stare at me and then as I was getting ready to word vomit again, they would answer the question. But keeping that in mind, if you have somebody that you know struggles to process information, not throwing a whole bunch of directions at them at a time. One task at a time. Once you get this done, then we'll do this. When you get that done, come and talk to me and we'll go from there. Chunking things up really helps with those individuals who struggle to process, because if there's too much all at once, they get overwhelmed. Just like I'm sure some of you do. Excuse me. Ask before offering assistance. Don't ever just assume that somebody needs something. One of the videos that they showed us at training at Epic, there's a lady who uses crutches and she's like figuring out how to open this door on her own, and somebody's like, here, let me help you, and she just falls flat on her face because she had it. She didn't need help, and because they didn't ask for help, she biffed it. Yeah, and just like us, everybody has their own ways of like working through things. I don't want to assume that any of you need anything specific, so ask before you need help. Hey, do you need me to do insert this here? Hey, is that comfortable for you? We can do X, Y, and Z. Does that make sense? Okay. Sorry, I feel like I'm talking a whole lot, which I know I am at the point, but it's still weird. And then, yeah, respect their choice regarding assistance. If somebody's like, no, I'm good, you can't just stare and be like, man, I really wish they would do that a different way. Because as long as they can get it done, they can get it done. And that's what's important. Be adapting and willing to make reasonable accommodations when asked. There's the statistics. I think that this is, I'm gonna try this again. I think the statistic is that for most most work accommodations are like a one-time expense of like $500. Then that's like the crazy things of installing ramps or installing this, not giving people a 5-minute clocking window because they struggle with the clock, like the time clock, or things along those lines. There are a lot of accommodations that we can provide that don't cost any money. There are a lot of accommodations that we can provide in the working environment, in the work environment that don't cost any money, and they might be a little time consuming, but in the end, as long as we're getting that product, that's what matters, right? Regularly check in with your employees to make sure that you're getting feedback, and then use that feedback in the workplace. If somebody says, hey, I'm really glad that you're asking me if I'm okay, you don't have to do that every 5 minutes. It fully distracts me from what I'm doing. Or, hey, I can only handle being upfront bagging for like 20 minutes at a time. Is it okay if I bag and then I go and do something in the back? Type of thing. And then when people give you that feedback, put it into place, especially if it's something simple to do or a simple fix. Management do's and don'ts. Do treat everybody as an individual. Do be aware of different disabilities and how those can affect the workplace. Do create a supportive and inclusive environment. Do provide training on disability etiquette and awareness, especially if a lot of small businesses will be like, we've never had anybody with a disability before, and then they just send them in and they don't give anybody any information. And so things can get awkward real fast. Do recognize and address performance issues. Don't let things go, because a lot of our individuals, if you let them do one thing 3 or 4 times, they're like, this is it. This is how we do it. And if you tell them a month later, hey, you can't do that, they're going to be like, what do you mean? I've done this for a month. Do make sure that you detail accessibility in job postings. Wow. But most of these, if you notice, just treat people like people. That's the main thing. Supervising people with disabilities is very, very similar to supervising people without disabilities. Sometimes you just have to take a more person-centered approach for the people that you are supervising. Don't make assumptions about what people can or can't do. Don't use patronizing language or body language. They're people, they're adults most of the time. I know that Special Olympics works with children, but especially as people get older, don't use age-appropriate language. Don't baby talk. That's one of the easiest ways to really put off somebody is when you're talking to a 40-year-old man and you're just like, oh, buddy, come on, what are you doing? We have to come over here. And they're like, what do you mean? Don't, they're, like I said, age-appropriate, body language, age-appropriate, words. Don't speak on people's behalf. Ask them. They know what they need. Don't ask intrusive questions. If you wouldn't ask a non-disabled coworker, don't ask a disabled coworker. Don't deny reasonable accommodations. Don't rush the person, especially if there's somebody who needs to take their time and really figure out what's happening. Don't pretend to understand something, especially if somebody's their language is muddled isn't the right word, but if they're hard to like physically understand, don't just, yeah, okay, all right, because it goes along with the age-appropriate language. You wouldn't want somebody to be like, yeah, I totally know what you're saying, and then walk away when you're like, hey, I need help, or hey, this is wrong. Like, putting in that time and effort to really figure out what it is they're trying to say and what they want to tell you is going to help not only you, but also it's going to help them. Don't pet feed or otherwise distract a service animal. Also, don't lean on wheelchairs or hang items on chairs or push chairs. Wheelchairs are an extension of that person. You wouldn't lean on somebody's shoulder that you just met because you were tired. Or, hey man, I'm gonna put my coat on the back of your chair because I'm hot and you're here. You wouldn't do that to somebody else. Don't do it to somebody in a wheelchair. Don't interrupt, rationalize, or get defensive. Interrupting can be hard, especially if somebody really struggles to get their information out. But like I said, don't interrupt. You want to give them the same kind of respect that you would give anybody else. Don't ask for diagnoses, and don't direct your question to a caregiver, companion, or interpreter like we talked about before. Talk to the person. Having difficult conversations, that's a part of every workplace relationship. And sometimes it's even more important to have those difficult conversations with people with disabilities, because they, again, a lot of times will either, if something quote unquote bad happens, it doesn't actually have to be bad, but if they inflate it or make it bigger in their head, it's going to affect more than just their work performance. And sometimes if you don't have that hard conversation, nothing's going to change. Everybody has to have those. Make sure that the specific issue is clearly identified and how it impacts the workplace, because sometimes people aren't going to care until you tell them how it impacts what the expectation is. Approach the conversation with empathy and respect. Make sure to use clear, concise language that they understand. Don't make assumptions about their abilities or their needs. Ask what they need or prefer. Be patient and allow processing time. Keep the conversation focused to that specific event. And explain any supports or accommodations that might help. And regularly check in with them to make sure that what you talked about is actually helping. And again, this is one of those things where having a difficult conversation is hard regardless of whether your employee has a disability or not. These are things, take this approach, oh God, I'm so sorry. If you take this approach for people without disabilities, taking this approach for people with disabilities is also going to help. I always said when I was teaching that special education is just best practice in teaching. Managing people with disabilities is just best practice in managing. I hope that makes sense. It makes sense in my brain. Hopefully yours do. Here are some tips for creating an accepting work environment. Don't be condescending. Use age-appropriate greetings like shaking hands. Challenging derogatory language or jokes. Take responsibility for making people feel welcome and accepted. And then get to know your coworkers with disabilities. Getting to know them is just as important as getting to know your employees or coworkers without disabilities. They want to make friends. They want to be involved in what's happening at work. That's why they're there. When your coworker needs assistance, ask. Make sure you understand what it is that they need. Don't do the task for them, just help. Always think of the person first. You wouldn't want somebody to do the thing for you. You would, if you asked for help, you would want help doing it, not completion. Speak directly to the person we talked about. Don't be afraid of making a mistake. Mistakes happen, and the way that you approach after the mistake is how that mistake is going to be given. If you can say, hey, I'm sorry, that, silly us, is way better than, oh my God, I can't do this, I can't look at them. Like, it happens. It happens all the time. Use common sense. Be generous with yourself and your coworker. Again, ask, made a mistake, apologize, correct, and move on. And then this is just an overview of what I've talked about. And the main thing to remember is that people with disabilities are just that. They're people. If you wouldn't treat a coworker without a disability that way, don't treat your coworker with a disability that way. Thank you. Questions that I can fumble through and try to answer. Yeah.
So my office is actually in Springfield as well. So if I have athletes that are interested in being part of this program, are you able to place them in businesses that already exist, or you have to go out and find new businesses that are hiring?
with employment, we generally work, we have some relationships with individual businesses, but a lot of it is person-centered, and we reach out to places that the individual is interested in, or a lot of times it's job first. Like we look, if they're like, I want to work in retail, then we look at retail places that are opening. If we have a contact, that's awesome, and we'll reach out and say, hey, I've got Jimbo here who wants a job being insert whatever here. But, so it's a lot like the job search process for you or I, except they have support throughout the way, or along the way. Okay, I hope that answered your question. Anyone else? Beautiful, we love to see it. Hey, thanks again, guys.
Alright.
Thank you. Thank you again to Epic for coming and giving us a presentation. We're going to take a quick 5 minutes before we start training pods, and then